Hello everyone, once again, and welcome to our live session today. I will be going over a quick startup presentation to welcome you all and introduce you to our program and various opportunities if you have not previously attended our shadowing session. So first, Pre-Health Shadowing is a student-led, minority-led, women-led nonprofit dedicated to helping prospective healthcare professionals gain access to educational resources no matter their demographic status, ability, or location. My name is Susan, and I am the Chief Liaison at Pre-Health Shadowing. And thank you everyone for attending today, and let's get started with the session. Okay, so just a little PSA, we do have closed captioning for all of our sessions to accommodate all students. The setting is available on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and if you need assistance enabling the transcript, please direct message one of our team members. We're always looking for ways to be more inclusive and ensure our sessions are accessible to everyone. So please, if you have any recommendations for how we can improve, you can always email us at the following email on the screen, which is info@prehealthshadowing.com. Okay, and also if you want to stay in the loop, you can always follow us on social media. We are active on Instagram and TikTok, or sign up for our email list on our website to never miss a shadowing session. So since this is an international program, we want to know where you guys are zooming in from today. Drop it in the chat below, and I'm actually calling in from New Jersey. Okay, I can't see the chat right now, but continue on. So in addition to that, I just want to say that we have some wonderful opportunities for you all as a benefit of being part of our program. So are you looking to get research experience? Did you drop the ball on applications this year? I'm excited to announce that Pre-Health Shadowing is launching a research program that will allow students to connect with PIs or principal investigators as they conduct research in a plethora of topics, fields, and locations. This program is 100% remote, which means that you have the power to connect with anyone. Some of the subjects, well, going into more information on the research project. So some of the subjects of research for this program offers includes diversity, medical education, student interest, health professional, school non-education, and mental or behavioral health. Students will then have access to professional connections through seminars, which are one-on-one meetings, and have undergraduate mentors assist them with their projects. With that said, we are also offering the opportunity for students to become mentors in this research program. Applicants are strongly encouraged to possess the following strengths: data entry, data analysis, academic writing, collaborating with students, presenting data or concepts, and more. So if you are interested in this research program or becoming a mentor, please scan the QR code on the screen and apply. In addition, for the month of December, Pre-Health Shadowings is excited to announce that we are hosting a bingo board social media event where you will be able to fill out a bingo board with each board having a specified dollar amount. To participate, all you need to do is post this on your social media platforms and get a group of friends to help you fill up the board. Check out our blog post for more details with using the link in the screen. Additionally, we have partnered up with Krispy Kreme for you to purchase 1 dozen donuts to enjoy with your loved ones. With a donation of $10, you'll be able to receive your treat while also helping us at PHS. For more information and instructions, click on the link sent in the chat, or you can just click on the link that's shown on the screen. Lastly, it is the perfect time to exercise outdoors with Pre-Health Shadowing's new Pledge Drive event. For this event, you will essentially be able to work out and help raise money for an excellent and healthy cause. So for every $5 donated to you, you will be required to exercise for 1 hour. And for more information and instructions, you can always check it out on the screen, on the link that's provided in the screen. In addition, I want to introduce you guys to an amazing Mask for Mask organization, which is woman-led, that donates 4 masks for every 4 masks sold. These go to people in need during the COVID-19 pandemic. So those include the homeless community, healthcare workers without proper PPE, and others who are struggling to stay safe. So with our discount code PHS15, you can get 15% off of your order. If you buy through this method, Pre-Health Shadowing also gets 10% off the proceeds, which is amazing because we are a nonprofit that runs solely off of the support of our community. If you want to play a bigger part in supporting PHS, we would love for you to join our network of student volunteers and team members. You can apply to be a part of our administrative team and lead students in various projects, initiatives with professional outreach, grant writing, and more. We understand that as a pre-health student, you may not have the time, so we also offer the opportunity to volunteer asynchronously with tasks that can be done on your own time. We would love to have you be a part of this program and contribute your own unique perspective. In addition, along the lines of that, pre-health shadowing is taking in great pleasure to announce the newly available PHS leadership positions for the 2021-2022 academic year. Our organization welcomes students of all majors, education levels, demographics, and professional interests who are eager to make a difference in the field of healthcare. Students can take on leadership roles remotely and apply to any of the following positions listed on the screen. In addition, if you are a high school student and want to get involved, we have also started a program called HTP, which is High School Training for PHS. This allows you to connect with college pre-health programs and get involved in fundraising for PHS and organize resources for other high school students who are also interested in medicine through the pre-health shadowing organization. Furthermore, we want to recognize the hard work of all of our students in the program. So if you're interested in getting published, you can submit essays, reflections, research papers, and reviews to our editor-in-chief through the link dropped in the chat or the link submitted on the screen. And we will have your work on our website, and this will look great on your CVs, applications, resumes, etc. So please take advantage of this opportunity. In addition, part of our mission at Pre-Health Shadowing is to promote diversity, and in order to do this, we have launched an initiative to have monthly panels to celebrate different demographics in the field of medicine. Some of the upcoming events include a series on patient experiences, a COVID-19 roundtable, and an international student forum. If you have a mentor, professor, or professional that has inspired you and you think can contribute to these conversations, please nominate them using the link. Lastly, if we humbly ask that you donate to our program. As you know, pre-health shadowing is completely student-run and working around the clock to keep this free and accessible to everyone. Unfortunately, Zoom and our website are not free, so any contribution you can give will be greatly appreciated. Now, if you're not financially able to, we just request you to send this link to someone you think can, so we can continue to support those who cannot afford similar opportunities. Okay, and this is just a reminder that throughout the session today, we encourage you to drop any questions you may have for our speaker in the chat, and our team members will be making note of these to be asked in the later half of the session. Make sure to take good notes as our professional is going over their presentation, as there will be a chance to take a post-shadowing assessment to verify your virtual shadowing hours. For more information will be available towards the end of the session, so please stay tuned. Lastly, if you can, we request you to turn your cameras on. However, this is by no means an obligation, as we are respectful of all different circumstances, but it does help us feel a little bit closer in a time where social distancing is mandatory. Lastly, we also request that you make sure to mute yourself, as this will ensure that the professional has the complete and full attention from our audience. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening, and now I would like to welcome our professional speaker today. Thank you so much for joining us today, and you may share your screen whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to see you all here today. My name is Hagerah Malik, and I am an MD-PhD candidate at the University of Chicago. So today I'm going to be talking about the path of being a physician scientist and my journey to getting here. But additionally, I also wanted to really serve as a sort of mentoring talk, and I'm hopefully going to be providing lots of tips and advice on how you can also pursue this same path. So hopefully by the end of this, you all will understand what it means to have an MD-PhD. And again, my journey, some tips and advice. And then I'll be talking a little bit about the research and clinical things that I'm involved in right now. And then talking about some more advice and resources for people interested in the field. And so the first question you might be wondering about is, what does it really mean to be a physician scientist? And the AAMC defines physician scientists as physicians who are either MDs or DOs with or without additional degrees, who are devoting regular components of their professional effort, seeking new knowledge about health, disease, or the delivery of patient care through research. And so the big phrase that is used within the physician scientist field is bench to bedside. I think this image really shows it very well. So as a MD PhD or physician scientist, you're at the lab bench and you're studying disease at the cellular and molecular level. And then you bring that information back to the patient bedside and try to generate new treatments and better understand disease. As this definition says, you can be a physician scientist without a PhD. But why should you get an MD and a PhD together? Because during our PhD training, you have dedicated training on how to conduct research, how to really think like a scientist, how to ask questions like a scientist. And that's not something that we necessarily get in just our medical school education. And so another thing is that you're taught how to write successful grants, and you can't do research without grants. So during the PhD, you have a lot of practice through courses and writing your own grants, and this makes you really competitive for future grants as well. You additionally have time to be completely immersed inside of the field of your choosing. And so you get to network with the other people around the world who are in your field. And so this really helps you to make a presence for yourself in the research field. And finally, as an MD PhD student, you have a lot more time because these MD PhD programs are often 8 years long. And so you have a lot more time to have sustained involvement in student organizations and community organizations and things that you're very interested in. And after you have graduated from the MD PhD program, MD PhDs are extremely competitive applicants for the grants that the NIH has for early career investigators. And so when you submit a grant and you have an MD PhD, there's a very strong possibility that you will be funded. And so it makes you extremely competitive in your future career as well. And so with MD PhD programs, if there are people who are interested in them and are interested in the path of being a physician scientist, along the application trail, you might see some different things. And so medical scientist training programs, or MSTPs, these are MD PhD programs that are pretty fully funded by the NIH. And so most of the top universities in the country have MSTPs. There's also just MD PhD programs, and these are programs that are often not funded by the NIH, but they're funded by the university itself. So that's two different things you might hear along the path. And funding in these MD PhD programs includes the complete cost of medical school tuition. So if you're in one of these programs, you're not paying the $500K for medical school. You also have health insurance, and you are given a living stipend through all 8 years. So it's almost like being paid to go to school. These MD PhD programs are highly competitive, but there is a smaller applicant pool. And so one thing that was really interesting while I was on the interview trail is I would see kind of the same group of people at all of the different MD PhD interviews I went to. So it's a small applicant pool, but it's highly competitive. And most students will often pursue their PhD in the biological or physical sciences, but there are programs that offer the opportunity to do your PhD in something like public health or epidemiology, anthropology, sociology, and other humanities fields. So that's also a possibility. And I do want to note that there are some program-specific differences. So if you are interested in MD PhD programs, I would recommend definitely looking at the specific institutions you're interested in. The MD PhD program structure can take one of two forms. And so the first form of it is a 2-4-2 structure. And so in this, you do your first and second year of medical school. Then you spend 4 years working on your PhD. And then you return for the last 2 years of medical school. So you do your 3rd year clinical rotations, and then your 4th year where you're applying to residencies. Alternatively, another program structure can be 143, and my program personally has the 143 structure. And so with this, I did my 1st year of medical school courses, and I also did my graduate courses concurrently. And now for 4 years, I'm working on my PhD. And once I complete it, I'll go back to medical school for the last 3 years. So this will be the 2nd year of med school, the 3rd year of med school, and then the 4th year. So there's two major structures. Additionally, the future career path of MD-PhDs is very interesting because there's specific research residencies that the top programs have created, which are specifically for MD-PhD candidates. And so these are often have the clinical part of it shortened by a year so that you can get dedicated research time in. And they really stress integration of clinical and research aspects. And finally, you have financial support, not just for your salary as a resident, but you also do get money from the institution to perform your own research. So it's really a very interesting path we can take. Additionally, as a MD PhD once you have both degrees, often you have to split your time between your research and your clinical. And the big number, again, that's kind of thrown around is 80-20. So often people will spend about 80% of their time on research and 20% on their clinical. And that's more common, but it's also very possible to move those numbers around and spend more time on clinical aspects or research aspects as you see fit. Many MD PhDs end up in academia and get professorships. Others might enter industry or work in a government organization like the NIH or the CDC. And honestly, with an MD PhD, you have a lot of options ahead of you and you can literally do whatever you want. And so if you guys have heard about Impossible Foods, the founder of Impossible Foods, who created all of like the impossible meats, is Patrick Brown, and he's actually a graduate of University of Chicago's MD PhD program. So there's really like the sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want with your degree. And so I kind of want to talk about now like my journey to getting to the MSTP, and in particular the mentors who really helped me along the way. And so I grew up in a small town in Westchester, New York. So the city's there, and Westchester County was the suburbs right outside of the city. And growing up, I loved reading, and I drew a lot of inspiration from the characters I read. And so this is actually a picture of my local library, and I had so much fun wandering through these shelves and shelves of books. And I particularly loved reading fantasy novels. And so Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, things with wizards and dragons. And for me, all of this really, like reading all of these fantasy novels and things, all the characters were amazing in that they were literally saving the world. And I thought that that was such a cool concept. And I was ambitious and I was like, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to save the world somehow. And so as I got older, I found a verse in the Quran which said that if anyone saves a life, it is as though they have saved all of mankind. And so it kind of fit really well with this childhood dream of mine to be like my favorite protagonists in these stories and really make a difference in the world. And so I ended up, for my undergrad, I was at Sarah Lawrence College. And so I am a first generation college student, and I definitely had a lot of challenges getting to college, getting through college, getting into an MD PhD program. And so I'm very passionate about helping others attain their goals and go to college and go to medical school. So my undergrad was a very small liberal arts college in Bronxville, New York, which was also in Westchester County. And our motto was wisdom with understanding. And that's something that I've carried throughout my life, because I think for me, it really means that even if we have knowledge, it's not it's not enough unless you understand it. My undergrad was very unique in that it was based upon the principles of John Dewey. And he talks about a school as an embryonic community life, active with types of occupations that reflect the life of larger society and permeated throughout with the spirit of art, history, and science. When the school introduces and trains each child of society into membership within such a little community, saturating him with the spirit of service and providing him with the instruments of effective self-direction, we shall have the deepest and best guarantee of a larger society, which is worthy, lovely, and harmonious. And so kind of like the important things that I take out of this, and I took out of my education at Sarah Lawrence College, was the importance of community, the spirit of art, history, and science, and all three of those together, a spirit of service and effective self-direction. And so one other thing I want to point out is that our mascot was a griffin, which is a mythological creature. And so there's a part of me that likes to think that it's kind of continuing my childhood dream of being someone who can like make a difference in the world. And I have this mythological beast to help me along. And so often when we think about college, we think about things like multiple choice exams, grades, finals, prereqs, major requirements, and large lectures. But Sarah Lawrence College inverted that sort of structure completely. And so instead of multiple choice exams, we only had short answer or essay exams. We never saw our grades until the end of the semester. So if we handed in an essay, for example, we would get it back with just comments and there'd be no grade on it. And the idea was that we should focus on the comments and try to improve our work rather than focus on the number we get. Additionally, we didn't really have midterms or finals. We instead had conference projects. And so these were semester-long research projects that culminated in a 20+ page paper for every class. So there was that. And additionally, we didn't have majors or prereqs, and we were given complete academic freedom to take whatever courses we wanted and really do whatever we wanted in our education. And additionally, we also didn't have large lecture structures to our courses. All of our courses were these roundtable seminars. So it would be you sitting at this huge round table, and there was always 15 or fewer students per class. And so you and 15 students and the professor would be sitting on equal footing around a round table and discussing and learning from one another. And so this was a time for me where I had, I think, the greatest intellectual discovery and growth. And I literally took classes in so many different things: Eastern European history, writing, the psychology of creativity, poetry, alternative history literature, disease ecology, virology, transition metal chemistry, and the pre-med classes I needed as well. And so I felt like I really got to explore everything. And it was a place where it was education for the sake of education. And curiosity was that great driving force. And everyone at Sarah Lawrence was so curious and driven to learn. And so I think that college should really be a time of exploration for everyone, a time to kind of see what you're interested in and where you might fit in terms of like your future career and interests. And so in terms of academics, I learned that I was very passionate about science, and in particular through my research, innate immunology and biochemistry were the two things that I really loved. And I was always interested in writing as well and telling stories. And I also wanted to see if I was potentially interested in teaching. And so I did a program called the Health and Science After School Program. We went to a local after school program and taught science lessons to kids from grade kindergarten to 8th grade. I also volunteered at a place called the Edenwald School and did an after school program there. And it was an after school program for wards of the state. And then in terms of trying to figure out which demographics or subset of medicine I might be interested in, I shadowed child abuse pediatricians. And so I learned about how the legal system and social work and medicine interfaced with one another. I also volunteered at a telehealth intervention program. And so this was a public health program in my county. And I got to do a lot of work with seniors and helping them with like medical screenings and things. So I got to work with a geriatric population. And finally, I also did a summer program for refugee families. And I learned about trauma-informed care and what that really meant there. And in terms of some of the clinical things I did, I was a volunteer in the operating room staging area. I also volunteered at a free medical clinic in the city. And so I had a lot of opportunities there as well. And then research was, of course, really important for me. And we'll get into that. But as I guess like one of the first points of like mentorship here is how do you find these opportunities? And I know it was something that I really struggled with, not really having anyone to show me how to find them. And so I think the first thing you can definitely do is like do your research on things like the student organizations at your college. Is there a community partnerships or an Office of Civic Engagement? What are the local community organizations? What hospitals are in the area? And they might have opportunities. Send emails, lots and lots of emails, or call people. Both really work well. Additionally, be open to trying new things that aren't necessarily medically related. And so things like learning life skills or communication or hobbies. And so, for example, the Health and Science After School program, it wasn't clinical, but I learned how to take complex scientific ideas and break them down into simpler terms so that people could easily understand them. And that's such an important skill as a clinician to be able to do that. Additionally, be consistent and dedicated to what you love, because on the application process, like medical schools like to see people who've been dedicated to things. And in terms of finding research opportunities, you can talk to your professors and see if they might let you work in their labs. You can email different principal investigators and email them, tell them you're interested in their work, and see if they have time to talk with you or have an opening in their lab for an undergrad student. There's also summer undergraduate research programs at universities across the country that you can apply to. And if you're past graduation, so if you already have your bachelor's, there's a lot of post-bac research experience programs specifically for students who want to pursue an MD-PhD or a PhD. And the NIH also has a lot of postgraduate research positions, or you could be a lab tech after graduation, which is personally what I did. But talking about my undergrad research, I worked in the laboratory of Dr. Drew Cressman at Sarah Lawrence College. And I started working in his lab after my freshman year, and I worked the summer after my freshman year until my senior year, and I had my senior thesis in the lab. And so I studied a transcription factor and how it was regulated after it had been translated. So the transcription factor was C2TA, and it was really important for transcription of certain immune genes. And I won't get into too many of the nitty-gritty details on that. But one of the great things about doing undergraduate research is that you can attend a lot of undergraduate research poster symposiums, and you can network with people there, and you can meet different PIs and really be immersed in a scientific environment, which is great. Additionally, I think it's very important to have mentors along your path. And so I was really fortunate to have Drew as a mentor because he really challenged me and really helped to guide me on my path. And so his mechanism of teaching involved asking you lots and lots of questions. So if I ever went to him with, oh, I want to try this in my experiment, he would just ask me a ton of questions and get to the nitty-gritty details. And it was overwhelming, but eventually I got good at thinking like a scientist and like having responses to those questions. And he was always willing to explain concepts and constantly challenging me to do more. And I talked about the creativity, the psychology of creativity class that I took in undergrad. And for that class, I decided to do my research project on the creativity of female scientists. And so Barbara McClintock is a Nobel Prize winner, and she had a biography, and in that biography, she says, "I've often marveled that you can look at a cell under the microscope and can see so much. Well, you know, when I look at a cell, I get down in that cell and look around." And that's always been a line that has stuck with me, because looking into a microscope, you're literally inside of a cell. You're literally looking inside and seeing what's happening inside of it. And that was something very powerful. And so I would say that Barbara McClintock was another one of my mentors, and definitely an inspiration for how I pursue my own science now. And additionally, I was at the point where I was like, I really like research, I really like medicine, which do I choose? And I was like, I don't know which one to choose. And so again, being a first generation college student, I didn't know that the MD PhD path was actually a thing. And so Drew was the one who told me, you can do both. And so he really helped me along with that. And I think having someone who pushes you is really good. And I think Drew did that for me. I went to him with a list and I was like, these are the schools I'm going to apply to. He took my list, looked at it, crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage. And then he took out a new sheet of paper and he was like, aim higher, you can do better. And so he was like the one who encouraged me to apply to a lot of like the top institutions in the country. And again, if he hadn't crumpled up my list and thrown it out, I most likely would not be where I am today. And so during my, after I graduated from undergrad, I did take a gap year and I did HIV research in the city. And so to find opportunities, I sent a lot of emails to PIs whose work sounded interesting to find a lab tech position. And the PIs that I did end up working for, Benjamin Chen and Talia Swartz, they were both MD PhDs, and I had previously met them at an undergrad poster symposium I'd gone to. So that's why networking can be really important. And so we studied these purinergic receptors, which are a type of receptor, and we tried to study how they mediated HIV entry. And from that, I got a publication, yay. So I was second author on this publication out of their lab. So I also want to say that if you're considering applying to MD PhD programs, there's specific factors that you should really consider. And so I think it's more of a commitment to do an MD PhD program because you're going to be in that city for 8 years of your life, as compared to just 4 if you were in med school alone. And so it's really important to find a medical school where that fits with your personal mission. Also look into the institutional atmosphere. Are the people there happy? And also, like, is it a competitive environment? Is it super cutthroat, or is it more collaborative? Those are important things to consider. The research strengths of the institution, because you're not there just for your MD, you're also there for your PhD. So you want to make sure that your institution is strong in the field you want to do your research in. Location is important, because if you're someone who hates the cold and wants to be somewhere that's warm, don't apply to a school in Chicago because of the winter, and you're going to be there for 8 years. So does distance to family matter to you? There's a lot of location factors to consider as well. Additionally, who is the patient population that you're serving? Is there a certain population you want to serve over others? Additionally, funding. I think this is probably one of the most important. Is it complete funding or partial? There are some schools that will not cover your med school tuition. There are some schools that will. And so I think funding is really important to think of. And alongside that, the cost of living, and also the program size. Are you the only MD PhD student in your year, or are you one of 30 students, for example? And additionally, citizenship requirements. Some of these programs, because of their funding structures, have specific citizenship requirements. So I would recommend making sure to look into that as well. And so what the application and admission cycle looks like is you submit your application to both the medical school and the MD PhD program at the school. So it's kind of like double the work, unfortunately. But when you're submitting your MD application, you have your MD application, and then you have a specific MD PhD application, and you submit both. And then your secondaries are for both the MD specific questions and MD PhD specific questions. The MSTP interviews are about 2 to 3 days long, whereas med school interviews are usually 1 day. And many MSTPs will pay for your travel and lodging. So that's really helpful, especially if you're traveling and need to stay somewhere for 3 days. It definitely does help with the financial aspect of it. And to get into an MD-PhD program, you have to be accepted by both the medical school and the MD-PhD program. And there are cases where some programs might just admit you to the medical school, but not to the MD-PhD program. So that also does happen. And again, there's program-specific nuances, so definitely do your research on the schools you're choosing to apply to. I ended up at the Pritzker School of Medicine at the University of Chicago. And so this is my med school class, and these are my cohort members. So these are the other MSTPs in my year. So there's 10 of us. Another fun thing is that UChicago's mascot is a phoenix. Again, I feel like there's some sort of sign here because it's another mythological beast. And University of Chicago is really known as the teacher of teachers, and there's a really big emphasis on learning how to be a teacher and a mentor here. It's also one of the top research institutions in the country and the world. And it also has one of the most diverse medical school classes and MSTP programs in the country. And there's an extremely large focus on service and addressing health disparities. And our medical school has a pioneering curriculum on health disparities that other medical schools are looking at as well to implement their own. And so in terms of our program by the numbers, there's 74 total students across the 8 years with 9 to 10 new students annually. 48% of us identify as women. 22% of our students are underrepresented in medicine, and we all participate in service and community service things. And so if you guys want more information specifically on our program, you can go to our Instagram or be added to our emailing list. So I wanted to, we could actually, maybe I'll keep going and maybe we can do questions all the way at the end.
Yeah, basically it's up to you. We could do questions now, or we could continue on with the talk.
Okay. Maybe I'll continue because it might, some of my next parts might help clear up some of the questions people might have.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Yeah. So since I've come to UChicago, I also want to talk about what my MSTP journey has looked like so far. And it's science, medicine, and service. And so this is what a typical week for me right now looks like. And so in terms of like, I guess my week usually starts on Sundays. And so Sunday mornings, I take a couple of hours to go through my different volunteering commitments and send emails or follow-ups or do whatever I need to do for those. And then I also take Sunday to meal prep for the week and do laundry and catch up on chores because it's pretty busy during the actual weekday itself. And so Monday to Friday, pretty much like 9 to 5, I'm in lab. And so I'm doing my research in lab then. This upcoming quarter, I'm also TAing a class which meets on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. So I'll be TAing there. And I also teach in an after-school program for children. And that's something I've always loved doing. So I've decided to continue that. And I think for me, making sure to take care of my well-being and like my interests and hobbies is really important. And so Monday evenings, I have a board game night with friends. Another day of the week, like a Tuesday or Thursday, I might have book club or some other fun sort of meeting. I've gone to like poetry readings and other things like that as well. And then I try to do something like either lunch or coffee with friends at least twice a week so that I actually see them. And in terms of like clinical stuff, the way I try to incorporate it is I try to do like one clinical thing each week as well. And so I might volunteer at one of our free clinics, or I might go work in the ER overnight. So it's really great to be able to kind of combine my research alongside all these like clinical things, and also be social and also be doing teaching things. So it's the best of all worlds. In terms of research interests, I talked about how my previous experience was in biochemistry, innate immunology, and virology. And so I was interested in exploring neuroimmunology and the interface between our immune system and our central nervous system. And so I joined UChicago's Neuroscience Institute, and I'm a PhD candidate on the Committee of Neurobiology. And I'm in the laboratory of Dr. Demet Arac. And so very briefly, inside of like the human brain, we have neurons, and these are the basic functional units inside of our central nervous system. But there's also other cells called glial cells. These include microglia, astrocytes, and oligodendrocytes. And for the purpose of our the research I'm going to share today, we'll focus on the oligodendrocytes. These provide axon support and they myelinate axons. And so my lab is a structural biology lab, so we do structural biology and biochemistry. We solve the crystal structure of proteins, and that's really important because if we know the structure of proteins, we're able to develop targeted therapeutics against them. And knowing the crystal structure also helps us to determine their role in disease pathogenesis. And so this is a diagram of just starting from cells and going all the way down to molecules such as amino acids. The level of biology that I am studying is all the way at this end. I'm studying small molecules and proteins and protein complexes. And my goal is if I can understand what's happening at this basic biochemical level, I can apply it to what's happening in cells and in organisms. And so our lab studies Gproteincoupled receptors. And so Gproteincoupled receptors are these 7 transmembrane proteins. So they have seven folds in the membrane, and their cytosolic regions have these G proteins. And when they're activated, they mediate some sort of signaling. These are also the most highly druggable class of receptors. So if we're thinking about therapeutics, 35% of current drugs are directed against GPCRs. And they have multiple different families, one of which is these adhesion GPCRs. And this is the family of receptors I study in the lab. These receptors are called adhesion GPCRs because they mediate signaling through their large extracellular region. And so in the central nervous system, if they're binding to adhesion proteins, that leads to synapse formation, to extracellular matrix components leads to neuronal migration, and to different secreted ligands. This can be involved in eating up neurons or in myelination. And this is all mediated. This binding causes intracellular signaling changes. There's a disease called BFPP, bilateral frontoparietal polymicrogyria. And so here we have a normal MRI of a normal brain. And this is an MRI of a patient with BFPP. In this disorder, GPR56 is mutated, and single amino acid mutation, so changing one amino acid in this entire protein is enough to cause this sort of manifestation of disease. And so we can see a couple of different things. So here we see in gray is the cortex of the brain, and you see it's like gyrated and these indents and everything. But in BFP patients, they lose that cortical organization. There's none of those gyrations. Also, there's myelination deficits. So this white matter is where myelinated axons are, and there's not much white matter here. The brain ventricles, which are these black regions, they're also extremely enlarged as compared to in the normal brain. So these patients experience a lot of seizures, developmental delays. They can be tetraplegic. And we were really interested in understanding what the molecular and structural basis of GPR56 function is. And so we solve protein structures. And so with our GPR56 protein, we solve the structure of it. And so this is a ribbon diagram, and it shows how the string of amino acids is folded. And so our protein has 2 domains, the gain domain and the PLL domain. And I want to point out this orange thing. This is a monobody, and these are small peptides our lab has engineered that bind very specifically to different regions of GPR56. And so these monobodies are the therapeutics that we've developed, and we can use these to change the activity level of our receptor. We can use these to block binding sites. We can do a lot of things. And so one thing we wanted to do was we wanted to figure out which parts of this protein were really important and might have some sort of significant function. So to do that, we did conservation analyses. And so in this, we took the sequence of 102 different species that express GPR56. We saw which amino acids were conserved or not, and we overlaid that on the structure we got. So wherever we see these purple spots, that means that it is a highly conserved region across evolution, whereas the more blue spots are not very highly conserved. And so these highly conserved regions are really important. And so if we zoom in on, for example, this conserved region on the PLL domain, we see some different amino acids in purple that are promising. And so the H89 residue, so this is a histidine at amino acid position 89 in the protein, seemed promising. And so we were interested in asking, what is the function of this highly conserved region? Why is it important? And so we moved our studies into zebrafish. And so in this set of experiments, we had zebrafish, normal zebrafish, and we injected wild type GPR56 mRNA into it. And so what we saw was, and we quantified the levels of myelination in these zebrafish. And so the blue blackish stuff in here is myelin basic protein, and it's a readout of levels of myelination. And so in controls, we have a certain level of myelination. And when we add in GPR56 mRNA, the levels of myelination increase. So this hints that it might play a role in myelination. And then we have a mutant form of this protein, H89A. And so this is where this histidine residue has been mutated to something else. And when we put that into zebrafish, we don't see an increase in myelination. And so this mutation of this one residue prevents myelination from occurring. And so we were interested, so the cells that perform myelination, they're oligodendrocytes, like I introduced earlier. And so we were wondering, how does this region, how does it regulate development of these cells? How does it regulate myelination? And so we hypothesized that conserved patch was a ligand binding site. So normally you have a ligand which binds, but when we mutate that H89 residue, the ligand can no longer bind. But which ligand binds? So I'm going to skip through this a little quickly, but we had a candidate ligand called TG2, which studies suggested it bound to GPR56. And so we wanted to know whether TG2 bound to GPR56. So again, here's our GPR56 protein, and here's TG2. And we did binding assays. And so these are binding curves, and you might have seen similar curves in biochemistry textbooks and everything. But I want us to focus on this light blue line. This is the binding between GPR56 and TG2. And so this is the normal levels of binding. And this light green line is binding between TG2 and GPR56 with that H89 residue mutated. And so you see significant decreases in binding by mutating just that one residue. And so this points to the idea that TG2 binds to GPR56 at that conserved region. And so if we're looking at that conserved region again, there's a triple mutant that completely abolishes binding. So if you get rid of the H89, the Y93 and the R104 residue, if you get rid of these three residues, you completely eliminate TG2 binding. And so this is direct evidence that this ligand binds to this receptor by these three different amino acids. And then the question becomes, can we modulate this interaction for therapeutic purposes? So now that we have the structure, now that we know at the amino acid level, we know which 3 amino acids are important for binding. Can we modulate this interaction? And so remember I talked about those monobodies, which were the synthetic peptides we generated. So normally what occurs is TG2 binds, but, and you get that myelination occurring. But our hypothesis, we have another monobody called beta-7, but when beta-7 binds, and it binds specifically to that conserved region, TG2 is unable to bind. And this was in fact what we saw in our experiments, where you normally have this level of TG2 binding to GPR56, but when you add in the beta-7 monobody, it blocks the binding site and you see significant decreases in binding. And so this could potentially prevent proliferation of oligodendrocytes and myelination. And so right now we're really interested in seeing how this beta-7 monobody affects the signaling and activity of this receptor. And if we can use these in an animal model and try to see some sort of therapeutic benefit. And so this kind of shows how our knowledge of the structure showed us that this protein was important in myelination, and it was important for binding TG2, and that we can potentially modulate this interaction and develop a therapeutic for disease. And so now I want to move to some of my clinical experiences, and especially addressing health disparities on the south side of Chicago. So this graph shows the different areas and neighborhoods in Chicago. In dark black, so it's showing life expectancy. And so like the darker black color represents lower life expectancy, and the whiter colors represent higher life expectancy. And so the south side of Chicago is right here, and it has significantly decreased life expectancy because of health disparities. And health disparities are health differences that are linked with social, economic, or environmental disadvantage. And they adversely affect groups of people who have systemically experienced obstacles based on their race and identity. And so on the south side of Chicago, the big manifestation we can see is, in general, a lower life expectancy. Additionally, UChicago Medicine, our hospital system, did a community health needs assessment where they really looked at the demographic data in our population that we serve. And so this in blue is the regions of Chicago that we primarily serve, which is composed of 625,000 people, and it's 23% of the Chicago population. If we look at the racial and ethnic breakup of our patient population, 77% of it identifies as non-Hispanic Black. And then the next big majority is Hispanic or Latinx identifying. And so we have a really high population of people of color that we are seeing, as compared to other parts of Chicago or Illinois, or even in the US. Social determinants of health are kind of what they sound like, social factors that impact our health. And so our service area has 53% of people in our service area are at or below the poverty line, which is double the state level. 1 in 2 households are at risk of food insecurity. 43% of children on the south side are in poverty. Unemployment rates are at 21%. And education, only 16% have less than high school grads. So our south side population does have good education, but there's still high rates of unemployment. Oh, sorry. In terms of the number of patients who come into the ER for adult diabetes visits, for example, it's really high in our service area. For diabetes, asthma, youth asthma, these are problems that a large proportion of our service area encounters. Unfortunately, the communities on the south side are also communities that have really high violent crime rates. And high violence rates lead to things like chronic stress, mental health issues, trauma, and decreases in physical activity. We also have a lot of mental health visits to our ERs. And so the top 5 causes of death in the community we serve are heart disease, cancer, diabetes, homicide, and stroke and cardiovascular disease. And we see a lot of these all, unfortunately. And so some of the ways that our hospital system and our medical school tries to address this is we have a series of student-run free clinics. We have 5. So there's one for women and children who are in a homeless shelter. There's a pediatric clinic for children on the South Side. We have one which serves a predominantly East Asian population and was started by MD-PhD students here. We have one for the South Asian population, and then there's a Chicago-wide one, which is also the largest free clinic in the US. And so my responsibility as a medical student when I'm working at one of these clinics is identifying the patient's chief complaint, taking medical history, doing a physical exam, drawing blood and administering vaccines and small things like that, and also presenting the case to the attending. So it's great that I get to use the science part of my brain by day, and then in the evenings be able to go to the clinic and use those skills. Additionally, homelessness is a really big problem in Chicago. And so we have about 4,400 people who are experiencing homelessness. And on any given night, we have at least about 1,400 on the streets. Additionally, we can see also like the household compositions here as well. But homelessness is definitely a significant problem in Chicago, but the numbers aren't so high that it seems like an impossible thing to address. And so I'm on the board of an organization called Chicago Street Medicine. So we bring medical care and resources to people living on the streets. So we do medical screenings, we connect them with free or low-cost medical care. We provide on-site, we provide wound first aid and care. We also distribute naloxone in the case of drug overdoses, and we partner with community organizations for things like food distribution. We also do resource distribution, so giving out jackets, blankets, tents, especially as the weather is getting colder. And we're starting on getting together mental health resources as well for the homeless population in Chicago. And we have chapters at University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Streeterville, and a couple of other institutions are joining our mission as well. And so these are like some of the things that I'm like very involved in. And I am also very involved in working at the emergency room we have. Our emergency room is a level 1 trauma center. And so what that means is that we have the highest level of surgical care, and we are able to see like the severest trauma cases that come. And so we have 24-hour in-house coverage. So there's always specialists and surgeons available. There's always operating rooms that are prepped and ready. And we also have our emergency helicopter. So we have a lot of really, we're able to see the highest or like the most traumatic cases. And so I work closely with the attendings and residents. And so I get to see the patients, I help with the physical exams. I get to observe and learn some of the different procedures they do in there. And we see a lot of trauma cases, like I said, so it's very, I don't know, I think like the ER is the one place where you're really interfacing directly with the community. And so like I showed those statistics about there's a lot of trauma and violent crime in Chicago, but I think the ER is where you literally see that on a more human face. And so at the end of this, I want to kind of talk about what being a physician scientist means to me. And so definitely the bench to bedside. I want to be at the bench, discovering how a disease works and developing therapeutics and bringing that to my patients. And to do that, I want to be not just a healer and not just a scholar, but also an innovator. Additionally, I think it's a way for me to make a difference in the world through the patients I directly interact with, and also indirectly with the therapies that I will hopefully create in the future. And UChicago being the teacher of teachers, one thing that's very important to me, and especially because I was a first generation college student and I didn't really have any family member to guide me through this whole path. For me, I'm very passionate about mentorship and increasing accessibility to science and medicine. And going back to my undergrad, where the motto was wisdom with understanding, it's not enough for me to know that a medication is going to treat a disorder. Like, I want to know the why. I want to know those nitty gritty details. I want to know what amino acids are involved, because I think that's how, if I can understand disease at that level, I think we can generate such great cures and such specific medications. And so I really see being a physician scientist as opening the nesting doll of disease. And so on the outside, you might see all of these reports that are talking about health disparities and all the like social determinants of health. But then to you comes a patient, and they might have a problem with a certain organ system. It might be a certain type of cell. It might be a certain protein that's not working properly. And then at that very basic level, those amino acids, which might not be working properly or might be mutated. And so I really see disease as this sort of nesting doll where I, as a physician scientist, get to go from the level of amino acids and molecules all the way up to the level of more like sociology and like social determinants of health and health disparities. And I just want to say that like it hasn't been an easy path. And so I talked about a lot of great things, but there's also some negatives. So my first week of undergrad, the pre-health advisor sat down with me and we talked for a little bit, and then she laughed and told me I wouldn't get into medical school. And she was clearly wrong. But that was a challenge. I'm also a first-gen college student, so that's had its own challenges. I took the MCAT twice because the first time I didn't score where I wanted to, and so I did take it twice. Imposter syndrome is something that's very real. Even to this day, like right now, today, I still feel imposter syndrome, and I'm like, should I actually be here? Do I deserve this? And there's a concept in academia of the CV of failures. So people will make a CV, a resume that has all the things that they failed at. And I can assure you mine is very, very long. And so I got a lot of rejections to schools, internships, jobs, leadership opportunities, grants. I sent a ton of emails to people and I never got answers back. So there's a lot of that. I also had like health problems at one point. And so I think people often see the success, but it hasn't been an easy path. And I think for you all who are listening, I think prioritizing your well-being is really important. And so these are my cats. They are very important for my mental well-being. And if you're not physically, mentally, or emotionally well, it's really hard to be successful and to do well in other aspects of your life. So, you know, having a strong support network of family and friends is really important. Pets, such as my cats, maintaining your hobbies, engaging in self-care, and look for medical schools that are going to support you and your well-being. Like that is the most important thing, I believe. Additionally, finding mentors. So how do you find mentors? It can be professors who you have class with. It can be academic advisors. It can be people who you admire. And, you know, for me, that was a lot of like the fictional characters I read in my books. It was famous scientists like Barbara McClintock. Even in their stories, you can find mentorship and lessons. And also go to events, go to research presentations and poster symposia and departmental events and really talk to people and get out there. I am an introvert. I hate going to these events, but I still force myself to because it does help in your career. Also, older students who are in your program can be helpful. Family members and friends who might be in a similar path as you, or emailing someone to ask to talk. I'm also on a board of an organization called the Populi Foundation, and we're a nonprofit and we provide pre-med counseling to students from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. And so we pair undergraduate students with medical student mentors, and it's completely free. And, you know, this is like part of the work that I'm trying to do to help people who are disadvantaged to enter medicine and to enter science. And so you can find our information for this here. And to end with, I just want to say thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take questions. This is my contact email and my Twitter. So this email I will have forever. It's my personal email. So if you guys have any questions or things that don't get answered, or you want to chat, please feel free to contact me here. And yeah, I am happy to take questions.
Okay, so before jumping into the Q&A session, I just want to say your journey was really remarkable in the sense that like everything you talked about was essentially everything that surrounds like medicine. Like I guess like when you're going to medical school, it's kind of like hard, or like not hard, but more like you tend to forget about more like the health policy and like public health and like the research aspect, because you focus on like, oh, I need to get the medicine, so like my journey is point A to point B. So like just from your talk today, I was just very impressed by the amount of like topics and like subjects you covered, because currently I'm actually a double major in healthcare like administration, and I came into this talk not expecting you to talk about like health disparities and social determinants. So I was really surprised when you mentioned all those points and like how you essentially was able to connect all of that back into your medical like career. So I found it just very impressive overall on the stuff that you're doing. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing everything you shared in the presentation today. You definitely opened my eye up to a lot of things. Now I'm also interested in like the MD PhD program, because it's kind of like the path that I want to pursue, because I'm interested in research, but at the same time it's like, oh, but there's medical school. So I wasn't sure which where to go. So kind of like what you were experiencing during your undergrad years. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us, because honestly, I had no idea this was a thing until you basically told us that it's possible to do too. So I just want to thank you so much for the talk again.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, that's my hope, that I can like introduce how wonderful this field is to other people. So I'm really glad to hear that.
So now what we're going to do is that we've been collecting questions throughout the session today, and we will start. There is quite a bit of a list, because as mentioned before, you are the first MD PhD candidate, so there's a lot of questions floating around. So the first one we have is more general based. So the student asked, how did your interest in research start? So how did you know you were interested in research?
Yeah, so I didn't until so in my freshman year, I was like, I want to do something over the summer. And so I was looking at different like internships and opportunities available to me. And so I came across my undergrad summer research program and I applied for it, and I was like, I mean, maybe I'll like this, maybe I won't. And I was like, it's like a 10-week commitment. It's fine if I don't like it. So it wasn't until I got into the lab and started doing research that I realized that I loved it. And honestly, like the research that you do in the lab is nothing like what you learn in your biology classes or your biology labs. Like, and like even like in a textbook, you might see like a cellular pathway, but there was hundreds of papers that went into generating that cellular pathway. So that like 1 or 2 lines in your textbook is actually like 100 papers. So I don't think there's any way to know that you like research until you actually do it. So I would recommend, like I said, I think college is a time for exploration. So you've got nothing to lose by trying research.
Yeah, thank you so much for the response. And honestly, I think that's pretty accurate in terms of like, oh, finding your interest in research, because most people just want to get research for the sake of getting it. But then once they actually in the lab, I feel like they really feel that sense of passion and that sense of interest when they start to perform the techniques. Because yes, you can read about the techniques on paper, but it's super different when you actually like start doing it yourself. You're just like, oh my God, I'm doing this technique myself now.
Definitely, most definitely.
So we have another question from Kim. So she asked, how far are you in your specific program? I think referring to the MSTP program. So what year are you in?
Yeah, so I am in my 3rd year now, which means my program is like that 1-4-3 structure. So I'm in the 2nd year of my PhD, but 3rd year in the program overall. So I'm almost halfway there. So I've got about 5 years left still.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. And just a follow-up on that question. She also asked, do you plan to maintain the 80-20 balance in your own career, or would you like to shift more towards like a clinical focus? And how difficult would it be to have something close to like more clinical stuff? So like, for example, 70-30 or like 60-40 instead.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, I'm honestly not sure yet. I think I definitely do want to have like clinical and like I would like clinical to be an important part of mine. So I don't know if I would do 80-20 or more like 70-30 or something, but it's definitely very possible to like kind of tailor your career to how you want it. The one thing that might be hard is like if you want to have your own lab and be a PI, unfortunately, there is a lot of like time that needs to be put into doing research. So it would be hard to do like 20% research and 70 or 80% clinical if you want to have your own lab. But if you, because there's a lot of work that goes into being a PI. But if you don't want to have your own lab, but you just want to do research at the side and like, then it's definitely more possible. So it also, I think it's definitely very dependent on your personal like career path and like what exactly you want to do, but it's definitely very possible to tailor it in whatever way you want.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. And just to branch that out even further, there's another follow-up question on it. So the student asked, can you become a full-time position through the MD/PhD program? Like say, for example, you're in the research and it was fun during the years, but then you decide that maybe academia is not really for you and you want to shift more towards like the clinical aspect. So is there a way to remove the research aspect and just focus more on like the clinical stuff?
Yeah, so you mean like if you start in the MD/PhD program and decide you don't want to do the PhD anymore?
More so, I think they were referring to like after you graduate from the program and then you realize that research is not really for you, or you just prefer like the clinical aspects more.
Oh, yeah, you can definitely do that. You don't have to do research if you have your PhD. The one thing I would caution is, I think with an MD PhD, you should be really sure you want to do it because it's a long road and it's a hard road. And sometimes it's miserable, but like other times it's like so amazing. So yeah, I think like with an MD PhD, like you're giving up 8 years of your life to this. So definitely be very sure of it before, because otherwise like if it's not something that you're going to like be passionate about and enjoy, it's not going to be something you're going to like, I don't know, like if you're not going to enjoy it, then it's kind of like almost like a waste of your talent, if that makes sense. If like you would be better suited to doing more clinical things, then like, you know, I think focus on that. But if you want to do research, then I would say definitely do this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the response and for the advice. So that answers that question. So we have another question here from Brenna, and she asks, what are some of the challenges that you face in research?
In research. There's so many. I guess talking about like the research I'm doing right now, there's a lot of times where like in science, things don't always work. There have been times where like I've spent like a month or two trying to work on an experiment and try to get it working, and it still doesn't work. And I think like if you move one step forward or like if you move 3 steps forward in a certain span of time in your research, you can move like 2 steps behind the next month. And so I think that's kind of like the nature of science, in that like we're literally trying to find new knowledge. And we're not always going to be right on our first tries. And so I think that's probably the most challenging part of science, where like often things don't work. Often you spend so much time doing something and like it just doesn't work out. And I think that's why like on those types of days, like I'm like, okay, nothing worked today. That's okay. I'm going to go home. I'm not going to think about science tonight, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. And so I think being a scientist means you also have to have a lot of resilience in that sense, and like be okay with messing up, with making mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the response. So now we have another question. It says, is it possible and or worthwhile to specialize in surgery as an MD PhD candidate?
Yeah, it's definitely very possible. And there are a number of phenomenal physician scientists who are surgeons. I know some people from like our own program at UChicago who have gone into surgery after completing their MD PhDs. And so, yes, I think it's definitely very possible and very doable. And again, I think like it depends on like what you want out of your career. So I know a lot of people who go into surgery often end up doing more clinical based research as compared to like lab bench research. So again, yes, it's very possible. The world is your oyster.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. It does sound a bit hard, just like on the surface, like just like talking about it, it does sound very difficult, but like as you said, it seems possible in a sense. Like if you're really passionate about it, you could definitely, it's something definitely you could pursue in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
So we have another question here that asks us about the pros and cons of an NIH funded versus a university funded program that kind of does like the MD and the PhD.
Yeah. So the MSTP program, so the NIH funded, those are like 100% funded throughout your 8 years. You won't have to pay med school tuition. You will be given your stipend throughout all 8 years. And so that's a given, but they often have citizenship restrictions. So I guess that's like the pros and cons. I think the MSTPs are often at like more of like the top institutions in the country. So they're also more competitive than MD PhD programs, like the university funded ones. And so on the other end, the university funded ones can sometimes be slightly easier to get into. I mean, it's still hard, but however, like with that funding, some schools don't guarantee funding throughout all 8 years. So some schools will make you still pay med school tuition. Some schools will only give you a stipend during your PhD years, but not during your med school years. What are other things? But I think those often don't have citizenship requirements because it's not money from the NIH. And sometimes in those types of programs, like you have to get your own grant to be able to go into your PhD. Whereas for the NIH funded programs, like regardless of whether you get your own grant or not, you're gonna have money, if that makes sense.
Can I just, sorry, just to make it easier instead of putting it in the chat, to follow up with that. So you're saying, I'm a little confused about the concept of the funding. Is that, does that just mean that the stipend that you're allotted, the cost of tuition, that's, I guess consistent? Is it, when you say, so are you paying for only the cost of basically getting your PhD?
You don't pay for your PhD either.
Oh, okay.
You pay for nothing with an MSTP program.
Holy smokes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's totally news to me. So
oh yeah. No. With an MSTP or an MD PhD program, like you don't pay tuition for anything. You don't pay for anything. Like they pay, like that's why the funding is so important, because they pay your med school tuition, they pay your grad school tuition. And on top of that, they give you like a living stipend so that like you can have your own apartment and buy food, and like you don't need to get a second job or something to do it. So like, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now, because I was confused about what that meant exactly. Are you still allowed to seek out additional grants and funding like privately?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, like during my PhD years, they require all of us to apply for NIH grants. They're called F30 grants, which are specifically for MD PhD trainees. And if we get it, great. But if we don't, we're still guaranteed funding. Like the MSTP will pay for us. So yeah. And so like, that's why I think like the MSTPs are I don't know, I think like they're like a surefire route where like, you're gonna be completely covered on the financial side. But with like institutions that are like funding themselves, they might make you pay med school tuition, or they might not give you a stipend all 8 years or things like that.
Okay, that clarifies most of my questions, actually. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
And just to add on to that, I have another follow-up question that kind of falls on the same line. So the university funded program, you will apply essentially, like as you mentioned in the presentation, through the MDs, like the school, the medical school, as well as the PhD school. But then how would that work for the NIH funded? Like, do you still apply to the medical school and then go back?
It's the same, like the application process is the same. So like you'll be applying to the MD portion of it. Wait, I might actually even just pull up that slide again. It might be helpful. Sorry. Yes, okay. Can you guys see my screen? Oh,
right now, no.
Okay, let's try this again. How about now?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, perfect. So the way that like the application cycle works is so you have the AMCAS primary application, and so you're going to submit that to the MD program. So you're going to submit it to the medical school, but then you check a box that says you want to also submit it to the MD-PhD program. And so when you do that, you're submitting to the medical school, but you're also submitting to the MD-PhD program at that institution. And so pretty much there's going to be 2 different admissions teams at that institution who are looking at your application. What was the second part of your question?
Like, does the NIH funded thing make a difference to the application process? Do you have to like apply on the NIH like website?
No. That like, yeah, that makes no difference. Yeah, we don't have to worry about that side of things. Like you just apply to the school and like it's like the school's responsibility to take care of like the things on their end, which is like funding source, for example.
Oh, so if I'm understanding this correctly, essentially you have to find like the MDs, like the medical schools that are NIH funded for these kind of like programs in order to kind of like go along the NIH funded track. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Because like a lot of the top institutions in the country have the NIH funded programs. A lot of other schools have MD PhD programs, but there's also a really large pool of schools that don't really have any MD PhD program. So yeah, I'm trying to remember. If you go onto the AMCAS website, and they have like a specific section on their, the AAMC website, they have a specific section specifically for people who are interested in MD PhDs. And so on like those pages, you can find like information about the NIH funded programs. You can find information on you can find information on the programs, on just like resources on like what the admission cycle looks like, other resources for people who are interested in the programs. So I would recommend going to the AAMC website and looking. Yeah.
Thank you so much for clarifying those questions. I think a lot of students had like that question in the back of their mind. So thank you so much for just kind of like going over it again and just clarifying any like confusions that we had. Okay, so we're actually running a little bit out of time, so we're going to get the last question in. And for this one, the student is actually very interested in the student-run free clinics that you were mentioning in the previous slides. So essentially, how do you find these like wonderful opportunities to like join and do like the volunteering efforts and stuff? Because there are a lot of students are very interested in these opportunities.
Yeah, so like the student-run free clinics that I was talking about in Chicago, those are specifically just for medical students, because like we have the training to be able to like do physical exams and know the types of things to ask for, like to get like the medical history and things. But I think like in terms of like in general finding opportunities, I think I also had a slide on this. But I think like one of the big ways you can find opportunities is really like looking into institutions in your area and seeing if, so if we go back to this slide. So like often I think colleges and universities will have like student organizations that might be more health or clinically related. I also like highly recommend looking at like local organizations in your community, because often if you're like in a large city, there's definitely going to be free clinics out there. And many of them do have opportunities for undergraduates as well. There was one that I worked in New York City, which allowed undergrads to help out. And so I think like, unfortunately, it's going to involve a lot of Googling and trying to find information on opportunities. I think an easy way to get clinical experience is if there's a local hospital. They often have volunteering opportunities that you can do. And in terms of like, I know one thing that happened to me a lot is I would like submit an application for something or email someone and I never like would get a response back. So when I wanted to work at one of our local hospitals, I submitted my application like 3 times. Nobody ever got back to me. No one answered my follow-up emails. And so one day I just decided I just called the volunteer office. I ended up talking to the director of volunteers. Like she picked up the phone, we chatted for a little bit, and then she's like, why don't you come in later this week and we'll get your like onboarding started. Like, and I think what it took was actually calling her. And I think like, unfortunately, it's not necessarily easy, especially like if like you don't have a ton of like connections or something in the field. And unfortunately, I think it means you have to work even harder. But it's doable. I wish there was like an easy answer I could give to that. But unfortunately, it's just going to be a lot of like trying to do the research on your own and like contacting people.
Yeah, so based on what you said, it seems like you just have to be more proactive and take the initiative to kind of just like look around the community and see like what opportunities they are offering you and just take any like thing that you can like essentially see or you're interested in. So I guess like that's like the main takeaway.
Yeah. And like I said, like I think in this slide, sorry, this one, like I said, like I had clinical experiences, but schools also really value things that aren't necessarily clinical. So like I had teaching experience, which like literally had nothing to do with me being in medicine, honestly. But like I was still able to put that onto my application and like I learned something meaningful from it. And I think like as long as like you do an experience that you learn something important or meaningful from, like I think that's something golden that you should put on your resumes. And so I'd say like don't even worry so much about like having like a ton of like clinical experience, because I know as an undergrad it can be really hard to get that. But as long as you have things that you show dedication and commitment to, I think you're in a good position overall.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for all the advice and all the tips that you've given all the students. So it's actually 10:30 right now, which means that we are coming to the close end of our session. So once again, on behalf of all the students and all the participants that are here today, I just want to thank you so much for just like taking time out of your schedule because you're very, very busy. So just we really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come and just talk to all of our students and share this new kind of like side to medicine that we were not really exposed to. So once again, thank you so much for everything that you were talking about the presentation. We definitely learned a lot today. But at this point, what we're going to do is just kind of like go into the more administrative stuff. So I know it's been like an hour, 30 minutes of you talking. So you're actually free to go now. We just have to do a little bit of wrapping up on our own side. So once again, just thank you so much for sharing your story with us and just allowing into your perspective on your medical journey. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for letting me come speak. And I just want to say, like, if anyone has like questions that weren't answered, I just put my email into the chat. So please feel free to email me and I'm happy to like answer your questions then. But yeah, thank you all for letting me come talk and for your wonderful questions. Have a wonderful evening.
It's it. Thank you so much again.
Bye.
Well,
So Christian, you could go ahead, and guys, we're just gonna wrap up with the presentation. So stay a bit for maybe like several more minutes, and we're gonna show you how to do the whole shadowing, virtual shadowing session hours. Go ahead.
So, well, it was a wonderful presentation. I think I personally learned a lot from this wonderful speaker. So, considering this, I would like to encourage everyone to reflect on the section today. What brought you to the section today, and what are the three major takeaways you got? And what do you want to learn more about? The writing or reflection is not required. However, we encourage you to submit it to our website for publication for recognition of your hard work and to enhance future applications. I would like to mention once again that pre-health shadowing is launching a research program that would also allow students to connect with principal investigators as well as conduct research in a lot of topics, fields, and locations. This program is 100% remote, which means you have the power to connect with anyone. And this is an 8-week program. For more information, please fill out the interest form sent in the chat below, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Furthermore, pre-health shadowing is also hosting a bingo board social media event for December, where you will be able to fill up a bingo board with each board having a specified dollar amount. To participate, all you need to do is post this on your social media platforms and get a group of friends to help you fill up the board. And additionally, we have also partnered with Krispy Kreme. With a donation of $10, you will be able to receive a dozen of donuts while also helping us at PHS. More information and instructions can be found by clicking the link sent in the chat. And so lastly, it's a perfect time to exercise outdoors with pre-health shadowing's new pledge drive event. For this event, you will essentially be able to work out and help raise money for an excellent and healthy cause. For every $5 donated to you, you'll be required for exercise for 1 hour. For more information, please visit our website underneath the blog section. If you want to learn more about pre-health shadowing and get involved in our program, we encourage you to visit our website. You can become an asynchronous volunteer to get certified hours through the professional nominations and graphic design and social media and promotions. We are also accepting team member applications, and if you want to take a more active part in the pre-health shadowing and lead projects and initiatives, please do stay with us. And once again, we are humbly asking that if you are financially able to donate, that you please consider sending a few dollars to us via Venmo or PayPal. It costs a lot to keep up this program, and it's free for all. So if you are someone who can afford, then please do. But if you can't, then please support us by donating, by sending this to someone who can do so. Now for the part we have all been waiting for, that is earning a digital certificate for a virtual shadowing hours. First is go onto the website and find our professional course pages. And next, you can take our quick 10 question multiple choice based on the content from the section today. You will have 30 minutes per attempt to earn 70% or higher to get your certificate. We know that sometimes technology can be tough, and for this reason, we allow 2 attempts to take the assessment. But if you run into any difficulties, please contact us. To ensure that our website does not crash from a high influx of students, we recommend waiting for 30 minutes to an hour after this section to take the quiz, which will be open indefinitely. Once you have passed, you can click the Finish Course button at the bottom of the professional page and download your certificate verifying your virtual shadowing hours. And if you have missed a part of this section or want to go back and view our sessions to earn more certificate with verified virtual shadowing hours, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch our previous recordings. You can also find them via the professional pages on our website and take the post-shadowing assessments for these as well. Be sure to follow us on social media or subscribe to our email list for the latest updates on upcoming sessions and events. Thank you for joining us today. Please stick around if you have any questions, and myself and our team members will be happy to answer them. This shadowing section is officially over, and I invite everyone to log off. And thank you and have a wonderful day.